Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2014's Monument Valley, the surreal mobile adventure that requires the player to navigate and manipulate impossible geometry in order to guide a princess to forgiveness.
Following that is the reinvention of the historical stealth action series, where Bayek of Siwa tries to free Ptolemaic Egypt from the Order of the Ancients, while finding out who killed his son. 2017's Assassin's Creed Origins. An interesting pairing of games this week. I think one best explained by optical illusions. You have these impossible objects in Monument Valley that I will leave to you to describe, because that is the foundational element when you're rotating things, and it's very MC Escher-like. It's certainly something there. And then in Assassin's Creed Origins, as you wander the desert, you can reach a state of dehydration and you start to experience mirages in the desert. It's not a big part of the game, but it is an element that you can encounter. So, hey, that's our tie.
But if you really think about it, the pyramids are in themselves geometry.
I suppose so. Geometry, optical illusions, it all works one way or the other. That's a good one. Hey, Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
I have been playing basically nothing but Danganronpa 2. That's been my life for the past week.
Good for you.
I entered the fun house. That's all I'll say. That's where I am right now.
So that would be chapter 4?
I believe so. Yes, that would be chapter 4. Ain't a lot of people left, which is surprising. Well, I guess I am over halfway through the game, but ain't a lot of people left. It's been very fun, though. I think it's Panic Talk action or the rhythm game aspect. I don't like it.
It is weaker in that one, yeah.
It is actively worse. Hangman's Gambit, the way it's been reworked, I didn't like it at first, but I have warmed up to it considerably. And then the rebuttal is super cool. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a neat one. More interesting characters, and must be good to encounter some music, from our conversation about that game early in the show's history.
Very much so.
What did I play? I think the only thing that I really did play, aside from a couple Hades runs here and there, just to throw it back in the mix.
Got to keep it fresh. Got to keep it warm.
Yeah, keep those skills loose and all that. But I started and beat The Artful Escape. And part of that was mostly for research for Best of 2021. Is it good enough to make the cut? You'll have to wait at the end of the year to see. But I thought it was an interesting game that I warmed up to it more as I played, because it's a game that's pretty weak on the mechanics front. And it's trying to deliver a narrative there, and it does a pretty good job with that. I think the one main musical gameplay mechanic that gives the player freedom of choice is interesting, though I don't know how much it adds to the soundtrack as a whole. It doesn't add as much as I think they wanted it to.
I had meant to play The Artful Escape, but I think I've kind of hit that point where I have to admit to myself, the art style just doesn't look appealing to me.
If anything, I think it's a game that's written up your alley.
Yeah, I have heard, and the way you described it, and its plot and all that sounds interesting, but I have so many other games from this year that I still want to try and get to. But who knows? It's on Game Pass. I still own it, or not own it, but it's still on Game Pass. I'll play it at some point, maybe.
It was interesting how that game was nominated for the Game Awards, and as a transition there, let's talk about some composer follow-up news, because it was the Game Awards this past week, and several stories to come from that. First of all, who won Best Soundtrack and Score? Was it aired during the show? It actually was aired during the show and not the pre-show, which is, I guess, an improvement.
Baby steps, I guess.
Because, it was one of those things where they were just rattling off awards with, stock music going in the background and wanted to burn through them as quickly as possible. Because that's where that fit in, was one of those sections. So no composer names mentioned, no music samples mentioned at all. And it was an ad break immediately after. No one came up on stage. Pretty weak there. And then they gave the award to Near Replicant, which, okay, yes, it is one of the best game soundtracks in the history of our medium, I suppose, but
it came out in 2010.
Yeah, that music was composed 11 years ago. So I don't know if it spoke to the weakness of the nominees that they chose this year. If Cyberpunk 2077 was among them and we're pulling from last year, that may be something. So I don't know, a little weak there, I think.
Yeah, I feel more and more that Chicory was robbed with every passing day. It was robbed. Chicory should have been in there. But then we also have some game announcements that came out of the Game Awards. Because, it's an E3 press conference first and an awards show second. But we did get some good announcements out of it, I suppose. Including that Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is coming to PC, PlayStation 4, and Switch on March 17th. It's gonna be the latest version, which I guess, I didn't know this, the arcade version got an update that the console version never got.
Oh, interesting.
And now this is gonna be that. Hoping for rollback netcode? They haven't mentioned anything yet, and that feels dire, but I guess we'll see.
Also, not the Persona 4 game I want on Switch, but I'll take it nonetheless. That's neat. Check out our conversation about that game soundtrack. It was one of our episodes that we talked about Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. Hey, remember how throughout the past year and the year before that, there's talk about, Silent Hill is coming back. Silent Hill, though. This secret game from the creator of Silent Hill, and it's a codename SH. Well, did you know it would mean Slitterhead? Slitterhead is a new horror game from Bokeh Studios, which is the team that left from Sony Japan, Team Silent, that had worked on Gravity Rush. They left Sony and they made their own studio. And that includes Keiichiro Toyama, who's the creator. So yeah, Slitterhead, and Akira Yamaoka is doing the soundtrack. Weird trailer for a game that's pretty early in development, I'd imagine.
Yeah, no gameplay whatsoever in it. It kind of wasn't a very good trailer, but I'm still very interested in the game. I will say that, so my roommate Ben was in a call with some of our friends while the Game Awards was going on, and I was like half paying attention to the Game Awards and half doing other stuff. And I see the words Silent Hill show up on screen, and my entire apartment, including the call that Ben was in, just hears me shout, "Oh no!" Because I thought that was the moment. It wasn't. I am very, very interested in seeing how this game turns out. It looks very The Thing.
Yeah.
Like very The Thing. Some of the imagery is really, the imagery of that monster like forming back into a nice old lady. That one hit hard. I'm very excited to see where this game goes. And more Akira Yamaoka, baby. Please put him in a good game for the first time in a while. Following that, hey, we talked about Cuphead. Like, was that the first year? That would have been the first year of the show.
A while ago, yeah.
And we talked about it because it was coming to Switch, which is around the same time that they talked about how it was getting DLC called The Delicious Last Course. And then nothing for years. But finally, we have a release date for The Delicious Last Course. That is on June 30th, and it promises more music by the amazing Christopher Madigan.
I think it was one of the delightful performances of the show to have that live performance of The Delicious Last Course. The Delicious Last Course. And then you followed up with that trailer.
Like a stop motion trailer. Oh, it was such a good trailer. It was a really good reveal. Probably the high point of the night.
Should have been a slam dunk to predict, honestly. But, a game that I had honestly forgotten about.
I mentioned it to Ben because he was talking to me when they were showing it off, and he was like, wait, I thought that came out already.
Yeah, right, exactly. A really cool moment, another musical performance, was Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett of Supergiant Games getting on stage with Imagine Dragons to have a performance between everyone of Build That Wall from Bastion. And then, they went into Imagine Dragons' performance of the opening theme from the Netflix show Arcane, the League of Legends inspired show. But wow, what a cool moment for both Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett to take their song and play it alongside Imagine Dragons. Just awesome.
At first, I was super confused as to why they were there. I'm still confused as to why those two things in general were paired up, but whatever. Right? But then I remember it's Bastion's 10th anniversary. That's why they were up there.
Yeah.
It was really cool. They looked like they were having a lot of fun. It was a good moment. That's the other high point, I think, except for the part that's attached to Riot Games, but we're good. And then in less Riot Games news, they also showed off the first trailer for Sonic Frontiers, which seems to be what if we made Breath of the Wild, but Sonic was there.
And we don't show Sonic moving in an open world, which is kind of the most important thing.
Which is kind of a red flag, but I guess we'll find out. Now, T-Lopes and Tomoya Otani apparently collaborated for the music in this trailer, though T-Lopes made sure to point out, he did not work on the game.
Otani probably is, though.
Yeah. Otani, I would assume, is probably there, but T-Lopes made sure to say that he did not do any of the soundtrack for the game itself, but it's still cool that they brought him in to do music for this trailer. The game's probably gonna suck. I hope I'm proven wrong, but that game's probably not gonna be very good.
And then it had a weird thing where it kind of proved a Super Mario Odyssey 2 leak.
Oh yeah, that's really weird.
Just amazing to see. So we'll see whatever comes of that eventually. And then ultimately, finally, the Game of the Year award went to Take-Two Interactive. I mean, It Takes Two.
Oh no, now we're gonna get sued.
Oh no. I thought, honestly, the game that had the least amount of chance of winning that award got that award. So, hey, Joseph Fares got on stage and gave another acceptance speech for the ages. Good for him. Good for that game. It's still a great game. Don't get me wrong. But, I mean, man, we were all thinking, it's probably going to be Deathloop, but hey, it'd be cool to see Metroid Dread, take the win. I almost wonder if, it got split so many ways because there was no slam dunk winner that It Takes Two kind of got to slip on through.
Oh, that might be what happened. Because I agree. I did not expect It Takes Two to walk away with that. My picks were also, it's either going to be Deathloop or it's going to be Metroid. I mean, I guess there's a chance in some reality it was Psychonauts. I've heard that game's very good, but I didn't really expect that one to win either. But yeah, Joseph Farrow seems good. He seems like a smart dude when he's not super drunk and yelling about the Oscars. So congrats to him. I still gotta play It Takes Two. It's actually on sale right now, I think, so I should jump on that at some point.
And it's also on Game Pass.
It sure is. But I don't want to play a multiplayer game on PC. Outside of the Game Awards, though, there is still some news. The Persona soundtracks are coming to vinyl. And I mean all of them. Not 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are being released in a 25th anniversary deluxe box set up for pre-order at IM8bit. It's only for the low price of $400.
Oh my god.
But don't worry, if you want to listen to more music, though, apparently Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 Strikers will be coming to streaming services, at least in Japan. Boy, I hope they come to America as well. That would be very nice.
That would be nice. And it's going to be interesting because it'll be the first time that Colors Flying High, the opening music from Persona 5 Royal, that'll be a full version of the song for the first time. All other versions, I guess, have been like live performances so far, but this will be like the first studio release of that. So that'll be really neat.
For the low, low price of $400.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Worth it though? Maybe worth it.
If I had $400 to just flit away, I can't say that I wouldn't be considering it.
And finally, to wrap everything up, Halo Infinite is out now, and I think that's worth mentioning because it includes the composers Gareth Coker and Joel Korlitz, who we've talked about previously on the show before, for their work on Ori and the Blind Forest and The Unfinished Swan, respectively, for those episodes. Also, Kurdish Schweitzer is in the mix as well. So, at least for the single player, I guess there's another composer who did multiplayer music, and that's not part of the soundtrack that's on streaming services and all right now, but that's a pretty good sounding soundtrack. I'm digging it so far, and that's even before playing the game.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to play the game because I'm not a Halo guy. But what I have heard of the soundtrack, it feels like they are really like leaning into some of the original Halo soundtrack aesthetics. And I think they do a fantastic job of that while also not just sounding like Halo 1 again. It's cool. Alrighty, let's talk about the hole I dug for myself today. Let's talk about Monument Valley. Monument Valley was originally released for iOS on April 3rd, 2014. Android would follow a little over a month later on May 14th. It also came out on the Windows Phone, but who cares? It was developed and published by Us2 Games. It is an isometric puzzle game where the player must guide a princess named Ida through a series of levels based around the concept of impossible geometry, the kind usually compared to the work of, as you mentioned before, MC Escher. I don't know how to explain that verbally. So here's what you're going to do, listener. Are you ready? Unless you're driving. Don't do this if you're driving. You're going to open Google, and you're going to Google MC Escher. That's MC space ESCHER. It's that.
You've seen it before, honestly.
Yeah.
There's the whole Family Guy bit with if MC Escher were a rapper, and it was like going up the stairs and going down the stairs and going up the stairs and going down the stairs and going up the sideways stairs.
It's basically like paths that should be impossible. I don't know. Look it up. I can't do it. I'm like starting to sweat trying to think of how to explain it. So in this game, Ida is not actually directly controlled by the player. She moves to a spot that you, the player, tap, assuming there is a path there that is accessible to her. And that's pretty much how most of the game is played. But you also have like wheels and stuff that you can manipulate around the environment. And it could be anything from like, oh, you lift this thing up, it lifts this other thing over here. You spin this wheel, it rotates a piece of geometry over here, and you got to make paths for Ida to make it to the end of the level. And each level actually has its own distinct mechanic, or each chapter, I guess, is more accurate to call it. There are 10 in total. And the player must learn how to work these mechanics in order to get to the end of the level. The main goal of the game is to guide Ida to a shrine where she will place a piece of sacred geometry, as the game calls it, restoring something to do with these monuments that you're exploring, because she's on a journey to be forgiven for something. It doesn't really explain that. The story is very minimal. And that's pretty much all that I can say about Monument Valley. So with that being said, Peter, what are your experiences with Monument Valley?
I played it. I beat it because it often comes up in the conversation, at least when people were talking about, mobile games that can be taken seriously, not just these tippy tap tap sort of microtransaction filled shallow experiences. Monument Valley was one of these kind of early experiences of like critically acclaimed mobile games that you can only really play there. And so I gave it a shot. It's pretty cheap and only a couple dollars. It's only a couple hours long. And I had a nice time with it. It was easy to control. It was an enjoyable experience. I didn't play with headphones on. I didn't play with any music on. So I feel like it was interesting to see you bring this up for the show and conversation where I'm like, I know nothing about this soundtrack because I was just like playing it on a whim one day, probably in public to kill some time. And so I didn't have music accompany the experience.
Interesting.
Which I guess it doesn't require it, but it, obviously music enhances the experience, but I don't think it's necessary as, holding the phone vertically and swiping and tapping.
I would honestly wholly recommend you give it another shot with sound because there is so much in the sound design of Monument Valley, just in general, even outside of the music. It's fantastic. I've played this game like 3 times in my life. You're right. It costs like $3, I think, normally. Might even be cheaper now. I don't know. And you can still get it. You can still play it. It is short, like you said, about an hour or 2 long, if that. It's a very neat puzzle game that I kind of figured I wanted to talk about it on this show. And I don't actually know why I decided I wanted to talk about it other than I don't know, just like Monument Valley. I think it's neat. I think it's a good game. So how did it come to exist? Well, the concept for Monument Valley came as simply as it possibly could have come. A single piece of concept art was drawn depicting somebody standing on MC Escher-style impossible geometry. Bam. That's it. That's the game. Very little changed from this core concept. Development for Monument Valley began in early 2013 under the working title Tower of Illusion, which is not as good a name. I'm glad they changed that.
But also it makes it tough to Google search because Monument Valley is the name of a national park here in the United States. So you really got to do Monument Valley game wallpaper or whatever have you.
I forget that every time I go to look up anything about this game, like clockwork, every single time. But they wanted the focus to be on tablets. So this game was originally planned to be an iPad exclusive because this is back when the iPad was just starting to get really big. But eventually, obviously, it would come to phones and stuff like that. It took around 10 months to develop, according to Wikipedia. This was made even more interesting, though, by the fact that Us2 apparently did not give the team either a deadline or a budget. They could take as long as they wanted, and they could use up as much money as they needed. That was it. They just said go. Now, apparently, Us2 does a lot of stuff outside of game development, so game development is kind of just a small chunk of where they make their money, and their philosophy, and I hope you're sitting down for this one, their philosophy being more focused on, quote, making a high-quality product first, with profits coming second. Are we still talking about the video game industry? And I mean, that's easier to joke about when it's a small hour-long mobile game. But boy, sure wish that attitude was a little more prevalent in this industry. So when it came to the visuals, artist and designer Ken Wong wanted to make sure that every frame in the game would look good if it were, on a public display or in a screenshot. The art style of the game was apparently heavily inspired by Japanese prints and minimalist sculpture, alongside the obvious MC Escher. And also, they kind of looked to fellow indie games when trying to figure out this aesthetic, including games like Windowsill, Fez, and Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery EP.
Yeah, really good isometric indie games for sure.
You can really see the Fez in this too.
100%,
it's
yeah.
Very clear. Another thing about the level design is its use of colors that are used to nudge players towards solutions without outright telling them where to go. And this is a feature that was inspired by Mirror's Edge, which, side note, how have neither of us talked about Mirror's Edge yet?
Good question, because it's known for that one pop song, and I don't know anything else about the score of the game.
Yeah, I've never played it.
Ooh, I tried it and struggled with the combat.
That seems how I would end up with as well. They actually did release a paid DLC pack in November of 2014 titled Forgotten Shores. It adds 8 more levels. And another expansion, which I didn't know about this one, called Ida's Red Dream, was made available for a limited time as part of an Apple campaign called Apps for Red. No idea what that means.
Red is a humanitarian charity effort, I think, driven by Bono. So that's probably why Apple's a big proponent of it.
Right. Now I do think I kind of remember what that was. Anyways, this expansion gave Ida a red outfit and added some more puzzles to the game. It reviewed very well when it released, Metacritic of 89. As expected, most critics heaped some praise on sound design, the art, the puzzle design, etc., etc. Though some critics did point out that, like, none of the puzzles are really all that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Like, until you get to the last stuff, then it's going to be kind of a head scratcher. But for most of the game, like, they're not hard puzzles to solve. And so they were kind of hemming and hawing at the perceived lack of challenge, as it were. It sold really well, though. They had recouped their entire development cost within 2 weeks of the game coming out. And at the 1 month point, it had sold 500,000 copies. 2 months after that, at the 3 month point, 1 million copies. As of May 2016, according to Us2, Monument Valley has sold more than 26 million copies.
Oh my gosh.
Having made over $14 million in profit. In terms of awards, it was nominated by a lot. It didn't win a ton. So it was nominated for the Innovation Award, Best Visual Art, and Best Handheld/Mobile Game at GDC. It was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Art Direction, Outstanding Achievement in Game Direction, Outstanding Innovation in Gaming, Mobile Game of the Year, and the DICE Spirit Award at DICE. Won the International Mobile Gaming Awards Grand Prix. I don't know what that is, but good job, guys. It won Best British Game and Best Mobile/Handheld Game, as well as being nominated for Best Game, Artistic Achievement, and Original Property at the BAFTAs. And it won Game Special Class and was nominated for Game Design, New IP, Art Direction, and Fantasy at Navigator. Why has it never left mobile, though? Well, it's not that it would be technically difficult to put it anywhere. The game was built on Unity. Unity plays well with pretty much every platform nowadays. But the game was kind of explicitly designed to be played on a screen in portrait orientation. And everything else in the world runs on landscape orientation. The Switch, the Vita back then, TVs, those are all landscape. And I guess they just never really figured out a way to make that feel correct on anything but a phone. Which, unfortunate, but unsurprising. Meanwhile, I didn't know this. Quote, the game was a minor plot point in the 3rd season of House of Cards, in which Frank Underwood plays the game. He is inspired by video game reviewer Thomas Yates's elegant description of Monument Valley to bring the reviewer on as his biographer.
Yeah, that show had some weird crossover with video games. Like, in one of the first couple seasons, he's playing a Vita at one point, like just out of nowhere. It's interesting.
That's certainly something I didn't know before. Monument Valley characters apparently appear in the game Crossy Road. I'm not super familiar with what that is. I'll have to look into it, I suppose. It was considered to be a largely inspirational game in the mobile development community, like one of the big names in making non-gotcha scam mobile games. And they're even are hints of games like Lara Croft Go having taken inspiration from it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's huge. These people made this obscure indie mobile game, and now Tomb Raider is using it as an influence. That's awesome. It also apparently had a very big influence on the Chinese indie developer community, which is interesting. The game came out of the UK, not China, so that's very surprising to me. Ken Wong, who I mentioned earlier, is one of the designers and one of the artists. He actually left Us2 shortly after the game's completion, and we have talked about him before because he would go on to create the studio Mountains and develop Florence.
I was wondering why his name sounded familiar. That's right.
There is a sequel, Monument Valley 2. It was released in June of 2017. I also did not know this. There's apparently a Monument Valley 3 currently in development as of September 2019. And, quote, in August 2018, Paramount Animation and Weed Road, in partnership with Us2, announced plans to develop a live-action / CGI hybrid film based on Monument Valley, with Patrick Osborne slated to direct. No.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm good. I'm just going to go ahead and assume, considering that anecdote was an announcement from 2018, that movie didn't happen and probably isn't going to. Anyways, let's talk about the composer. His name is Stafford Bawler. He's actually one of 3 composers, though he did a majority of the soundtrack from what I can tell. He seems to have been in the games industry since 1998 and has reportedly been credited on over 80 games as a sound designer and a composer, according to his LinkedIn page. I want to give shout outs real quick, because at first it seemed like I wasn't going to find a lot on this guy, but then I did finally find an interview with Bawler done by Alex Jones. No, not that one. I'm so sorry for what that one has done to your name, but not the InfoWars guy. A different person. And they write for thesoundarchitect.co.uk and did an interview with Stafford Bawler. So when asked about how he sort of got into the industry, he says, quote, when I was a kid, I had a love of sounds and music, but not in any conventional form. I loved Spectrum and C64 music and would go round my mates' houses, he's British if you couldn't tell, to tape music from their games. I also loved sci-fi film soundtracks like The Wrath of Khan and Tron, but I also really liked sound effects and would rewind bits of films to hear them over and over. However, it never occurred to me that this was something that people actually did as a real job, which is not an unfamiliar story. We have heard that exact story multiple times of then one day I realized it's somebody's job to do that. And he got into music in his late teens, making it specifically, mainly focusing on the guitar, but he does say that he used a noise tracker program on an Atari ST. Somebody out there will know what that means. Not quite MIDI. He made sure in that answer to state like that, not quite MIDI yet. And by the time he entered college, he was actually playing various events around South Wales and the rest of the UK. But he didn't go to school for music. He was in college for interactive arts, which he describes as being an early 90s take on what would become web design. He'd sort of realized by this point, like, a record deal ain't going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it just kind of isn't going to. And the internet was just about to be a big thing. We're talking late 90s here. So he decided, all right, web development's probably going to be where it is. He figured that would be a sure paycheck later on down the line, more so than music would have given him for sure. But one day, he was reading Edge magazine, and he saw a job listing looking for composers. So on a whim, he got an agent, and he applied for some of these listings, and a few weeks later he was working as the lead musician at the studio Silicon Dreams. He would move from Silicon Dreams to the studio Codemasters in 2003, And then in 2007, he would leave Codemasters to help found a sound design firm called The Audio Guys in 2007. He went freelance in 2013, and that's where he currently works now. Monument Valley was actually one of his first projects done while the freelancer. When he was asked about his creative process early on in a project's development, he said, quote, "It really depends on the game, but typically I find out all the essential details. The game design, what kind of game it is, what kind of presentation and art style the game is aiming for. Typically this is informed by the genre of the game. Being a technical designer, I then tend to think about the audio systems required and which kind of middleware solution would best serve that. Once the, quote, nuts and bolts are in place, I'll start sourcing audio material either through libraries or recordings, designing the sounds, and integrating them into the project. An iteration process begins here as well, with feedback, meetings, and reviews, to make sure what I've created is suitable for the game and meets the client's vision." And he says in parentheses, "Although quite often it's my job to help them think about what that vision might be in the first place." And then when asked, "How would you describe your job in one sentence?" he replied, "Intense, filled with challenges, but ultimately incredibly rewarding." In terms of his discography, like I said, his LinkedIn says 80 titles. Moby Games didn't quite have 80 titles on there, but it had quite a few, and these are the ones that I sort of recognize. He started on various soccer games, it seems, with like his first 5 credits being World League Soccer 98, Michael Owen's World League Soccer 99, UEFA Dream Soccer, and UEFA Champions League Season 1999/2000, and more.
Those are some titles, oh boy.
How many words can we fit on this box? It should be noted that for a lot of these, it's either he is the sound designer or he did the music, and sometimes he did both. But for stuff like Lego Racers 2 and Lego Island 2, The Brickster's Revenge, he was on sound design for both of those. Colin McRae, Rally 04. He did sound design mostly with the car sound effects for Forza Motorsport 3, 4, and 5. Did sound design for Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, as well as Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. Obviously, he did Monument Valley. Did the soundtrack for Armored Warfare. Did the soundtrack for Crackdown 3. And most recently, he did the soundtrack for Wallace and Gromit Big Fix-Up, which is, I guess, an AR game that came out in July of this year, which I'd never heard of, probably because it's an AR game. In terms of historical development research for Monument Valley, the soundtrack was composed by Stafford Bawler mostly, but also includes tracks by Obfusc, OBFUSC, so obfuscation, but without the rest of the word, and Grigori, Grigori, though Bawler also happens to have served as Monument Valley's sound designer. Bawler kind of describes the act of approaching Monument Valley as one where he kind of had to change his entire thought process on how he was going to approach the project, mainly because he specialized in that sound design side before composition. And so he said, quote, "Much of my work over the last 12 years or so since I left Silicon Dreams to join Codemasters has been as a technical sound designer. So a huge amount of my time and energy has been spent thinking about simulation, presentation, mixing, and various sound design challenges. My approach to Monument Valley was very technical to begin with, but the game really needed a much more emotive and creative approach." And honestly, it's a very, very musical game in general, even outside of the soundtrack, because when you interact with stuff, it plays notes and tones and stuff. When you click on where you want Ida to go, it plays a tone, and that kind of adds to the music and stuff. Because as you're about to hear, this is a very ambient soundtrack. Not a lot of melodies or anything like that. It's just there. It's in the air. So let's get into that then with critical track number 1, let's talk about amateur cartography. This song actually was composed by Obfusk. Really wish I knew exactly how to say that name. I don't know where this song plays. First of all, I went and looked up multiple long plays on YouTube and thought I was going insane because most of them were being played in silence with just the sound effects. And I had to start questioning myself of, are you insane? Do you remember wrong? Was there never music here in the first place?
Okay, so I don't feel as bad.
And then I finally found a long play that kept the music in there, which, why on earth, this game, 2 separate long plays I found cut the music out. So I'm very not sure where this song plays, but I really like it. I think it's my favorite song on the soundtrack. It's just sort of this very simple synth wall of sound almost that just builds little by little every few bars and adds eventually it'll add drums and it adds a bit more of a melody, though it's repeating. And I don't know, it's really, really nice. And this is the perfect introduction to sort of the vibes that Monument Valley is going for, though the rest of the soundtrack, as you'll hear, not exactly as melodic, but I think it matches really perfectly with the surreal imagery and all that.
I agree with you. I think it's the best fit for what you'd imagine the soundtrack to be, and it's very peppy and upbeat, and using those arpeggios and then building all those layers bit by bit. Yeah, you're right. The soundtrack kind of goes in some more ambient places, but this is a really nice one to start with.
So let's talk about critical track number 2 so we can hear what we mean by those being ambient as hell. Critical track number 2 is The Ghost. This one was composed by Stafford Bawler. It plays at the end of each chapter, though sometimes right before the final area, where you talk to a ghost. And this ghost is the main source of exposition in the game. He will tell Ida some stuff about the world, kind of saying, hey, we used to be this super big society, and then we all died. And now all of our monuments are gone and empty. And I think this song, just being this sort of mysterious sounding, deeper, echoey synth, fits that very well. You can sort of almost hear the wind of the ghost coming in. There's no wind when the ghost comes in, but it sounds windy. That's the point.
It does sound really spectral and ethereal. So I think that's a good fit for if you're communicating with a ghost of some sort. And if it happens, at the end of each level, again, wow, it's been a while. I think I'm going to have to replay this game with audio if I'm, forgetting these things. But if it's that kind of important part to cap off a level, then that's a good one to put here.
It's okay. I completely forgot this guy was in the game until I saw these. I've played it 3 times. I completely forgot about that aspect. Following that is critical track number 3, The Spire. Again, composed by Stafford Bawler. This plays in Chapter 5, where your main obstacle is crow people. And these crow people are jerks. Just like real life, just like real crows. They will scream at Ida if they see her.
Oh, that's right.
And Ida can't get by them when they do this. It's really funny, and they have like a weird amount of personality for emotionless crows that just scream every once in a while. This is another very, very ambient soundscape. Like, weirdly low key considering this chapter's whole thing is screaming crows.
Yeah.
But it still has like this feeling of atmosphere to it and some mysteriousness. Because, I mean, you don't really know who these crow people are. They just suck. You know that. You know that they're bad. I don't know. This song kind of stood out to me, but also I just remember the crows.
Yeah, I definitely just got some PTSD flashback of you mentioning screaming crows in this game. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm not sure this piece fits that exactly. It sounds really nice, especially with kind of like the panning that's going on with these low synth chords. It gives like a nice, not necessarily 360 sense to it, but a good kind of mysterious, just overall good feel to listen to this one. I like it a lot, but I don't know if it fits with the not danger per se, but the jerkitude of these crows that'll mess you up, man.
Yeah, like they don't attack you. They just sort of look at you and just go, "Why? Why are you here? Go away." And gotta move or they won't let you by. Critical track number 4, though, is actually the song that accompanies my favorite chapter in the game. It is The Labyrinth. Once More, composed by Stafford Bawler. This plays in Chapter 6, aka, like I said, best chapter of the game. It's the totem. The totem is a big pillar with an eye that Ida can ride on top of, and you control him directly, and he's delightful. He's great. That's pretty much why this song is on here. It doesn't really do anything all that super differently from the Spire specifically, but like anybody that's played Monument Valley probably remembers how the chapter ends, and it made an impact on me at least. It's just a piece that plays during a part that I very, very, very much enjoy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, musically this isn't doing too much different. If anything, it's doing like a swell up and down a little bit in volume. So there is that. But yeah, when you tie it to such a good moment in the game, yeah, absolutely.
We left him behind to die.
No.
I miss him still. And following that, the final track on the Critical 5, it is At Journey's End. This song was composed by Grigori, so we got one from everybody. This is the ending song. Ida's journey is complete, and as in the rest of the game, the sounds are being used alongside visuals to really bring about like this super emotional tone, sort of. Like those chimes you hear are synced up with visuals happening on screen and all that. And it's very neat, and it's kind of this really interesting sort of change, because organ synths aren't exactly something they use heavily in the rest of the soundtrack, but here it's like that's the one. That's the big backing track. And I think it works super well.
Love the moment when the bass just goes down with the Oh, it's so cool. I don't think we've heard too many tracks on this show where it kind of uses that effect, but wow, that's powerful. Nice.
So, tracks on the cutting room floor, I have two. First is The Garden. One More Time was composed by Stafford Bawler. Plays in chapter 2, and very, very relaxing to listen to, which fits super well here because The Garden is where you get your first non-tutorial puzzles, basically. It being this more low-key, relaxing piece, just I think does a great job of just being like, hey, slow down for a sec. Catch your breath. There's no reason to rush. You're going to figure this out. I don't know. That's what I always get from this song.
Definitely sounds like foundational music, not doing anything too bold or daring, but to have that go along with, foundational basic building block puzzles once you're off the tutorial pedal, so to speak. Yeah, that tracks.
And lastly, let's talk about the second track on the cutting room floor, Sounds from Shattered Seashells. And this is another song composed by Obfusk. I genuinely also, again, have no idea where this song plays. Both of his tracks, I'm very sorry if you're listening to this for whatever reason, but I don't know. This song's just really good. It's got these nice, relaxed vibes, but a bit more of a melody to them, and I really, really like this song.
That is something to point out, isn't it? That Obfusk's music is more melodic in that sense, and then that's the difference that you can point out. Interesting that you can make those kind of comparisons once you kind of learn about who's doing what in the soundtrack.
So what will I never forget about Monument Valley? Pretty sure last time I played it, I was in a hospital bed getting ready for a procedure. I think it's a very neat game. I've also played Monument Valley 2, though I've only played that once, and that was a while ago, so I don't remember anything about it. But, I don't know, it's a really, really neat game that I think is very easy to suggest to, somebody that doesn't really play a lot of games, but is looking to have something to do on their phone. It's perfect for that, and I'm very glad Monument Valley exists.
I am going to the App Store now on my iPhone and downloading it because I've already bought it. Yep, downloading Monument Valley again. So if I get some time, maybe I'll get to play it again, maybe this time with headphones actually in.
I would definitely recommend that because the sound design of this game is impeccable. Stafford Bawler is really, really talented at sound design. And that's an unsung part of the industry, I feel like. We've started talking about sound designers a little bit on this show every once in a while. And they do fantastic work. They're super impressive. So, for On Transition, usually we would cover a fan remix or a fan cover. Would you believe that this game doesn't really have any of those?
Boo, come on, people.
This game full of ambient tracks doesn't really have any remixes.
But it's a popular mobile game. Okay, all right.
But I do think that there is a very good track that almost made it on the Critical 5, but just barely didn't. I'm pretty sure the Labyrinth is what kicked it off. This is the song Oceanic Glow. It's very, very good. Please enjoy that. We'll be right back.
That sure does sound Fez-like. But how are there no covers? Anyway, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, we've talked about Assassin's Creed a few times on the show before. We talked about Syndicate in episode 10, Assassin's Creed 2 in episode 32, and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag in episode 75. But now, almost 76 episodes later, here we are finally talking about Assassin's Creed again, with the big reboot for the series, going back to its roots and changing up what an Assassin's Creed game is. So, Assassin's Creed Origins was developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft. It is a third-person open-world action-adventure stealth game with RPG elements in this one. Oh, that's really the big difference here. The game, as I said, it marks the start of a revolutionary mix-up in the gameplay in the primary installments of the series. It opts more for a level-driven, loot-rewarded, Witcher-like open-world experience. And combat moves from a Batman Arkham-like counter-streak system to more of a Soulsborne-inspired dodge, parry, and strike set of mechanics. So, the historical setting for Assassin's Creed Origins is Ptolemaic Egypt, basically in the time of Cleopatra. So think 40s BC. And this is the earliest set historical game in the series to this point, though that would be quickly undone by its sequel, Odyssey, with the Peloponnesian War and Athens and Sparta and all of that. So, on top of main quests and side missions where you defeat enemies, rescue prisoners, collect items, or investigate items of interest, you also get to explore tombs and pyramids. What would an ancient Egypt game be without tombs and pyramids? You also get to raid bandit hideouts, solve riddle puzzles to find rare loot, fight in gladiatorial arenas, and race chariots. Basically, get experience points, level up, fill out a skill tree, collect and upgrade a variety of rare weapons as loot, and craft improvements for your character's base stats by using materials found throughout the world. Finally, and most importantly, there's a bird! Your character has an eagle partner, whose perspective you can shift to, and it provides a bird's eye view of the environment. This allows you to scope out enemies, treasures, and other points of interest, and kind of marks your display with all these things for when you return to your character's viewpoint. As we learned from a game like Metal Gear Solid 5, it kind of helps to be able to scope out all of these things when you take this perspective in an open world, so that characters just don't get lost behind different environmental objects. So, the story of Assassin's Creed Origins. In 49 BC, Bayek, a Magi, or a guardian, charged with protecting the Siwa Oasis, is abducted along with his son Khemu by a group of masked men and taken to an underground vault in the Temple of Amun. They give Bayek a dormant piece of Eden. Oh yes, so we're bringing in the big historical artifacts from the Assassin's Creed series previously. They give him this dormant piece of Eden, and they demand that he use it to open a secret vault. Now, Khemu helps Bayek escape, but while struggling with one of the masked men, Bayek inadvertently kills Khemu. So, 1 year later, in 48 BC, Bayek has exiled himself to track down the 5 masked men to take his revenge. After eliminating 2 targets, Bayek heads for Alexandria to meet his wife, Aya, who has been on her own revenge quest. And she reveals that this goes deeper than just those men. Aya directs Bayek to none other than Cleopatra, who confirms that the masked men are members of the Order of the Ancients, which ousted her from the throne and seeks to control Egypt using her brother, Ptolemy XIII, as their puppet. Bayek and Aya become Cleopatra's Magi, or guardians, to not only restore her to the throne and handle looming Greek and Roman forces, but also to eliminate the Order of the Ancients. Meanwhile, in the modern day, because there has to be a modern day story in Assassin's Creed games, in modern day 2017, Layla Hassan, a former researcher for the Templar-fronted tech company Abstergo Industries, is tasked with finding and retrieving an artifact in Egypt for the Assassin Brotherhood. Now, Layla is hoping to find any relevant information that she could then send to Abstergo, and it would help her secure a position in Abstergo's Animus project. So she decides to relive both Bayek and Aya's memories using a modified Animus pod, and with the information provided to her by the assassins, without telling her superiors at Abstergo. Big questions overall. Who runs the Order of the Ancients, the precursor of what would become the Templar Order? Can Bayek and Aya properly come to terms with their son's death? And will Layla take her information back to Abstergo or defect to the assassins? Also, what does this mean for the origins of the Brotherhood of Assassins? So, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Assassin's Creed Origins?
I have not played it. I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game since 2.
Wow, yep.
That's still the only Assassin's Creed game I've played. I don't know if making it into an RPG would help me get into them more, but it's not really something I've had a huge desire to get into. It's not a franchise that I very much want to try sinking my teeth into again, if you know what I mean.
I mean, these are much bigger games now, honestly, with the open world and all that you can do. So they're big undertakings for sure.
Yeah, from what I hear, this and Odyssey are both very, very good. Valhalla, I hear, is also very, very good. But I don't know, nothing's really jumped out at me to be like, I should try getting into this series again. Maybe one day, but right now that's not looking super likely.
Yeah, so, oh gosh, if you've never played Assassin's Creed or you haven't played since 2, it's not a series I would recommend and say, hey, go back and play everything. I think you could probably start at Origins and be okay, honestly. There will be things that they make references to characters in previous games that are more meant for fans, but like this was a big reboot point. And we'll talk about that shortly with the development and all that. This was the first game in a while for playing Assassin's Creed as long as I have that I didn't get it right at launch. But I did within a couple months, and then, oh boy, I really fell into it hard and really appreciated and enjoyed the changes that they made to the series. I'm someone who likes these new styles of games. Not everyone does. It's kind of a divisive topic in the Assassin's Creed fandom. There are a lot of people who prefer the old games and putting more emphasis on stealth combat. I mean, stealth is important here. Sure, it helps. But you can also kind of gear up your character to be a warrior. It can go in, heads blazing, essentially. So this game is really neat. I think how it approaches a time like historical Egypt. And again, we'll talk about how it does some cool things there. But a good reboot point, I think, for the series and a fine starting point. But then again, yeah, this, Odyssey, Valhalla, they are beefy games for sure.
Can't you also go fight a giant Anubis in this game?
You can. It starts to dig into the supernatural elements of the series a little bit more. And that's also something that it's a little divisive for those who, I prefer the older games. I mean, well, when you're starting to talk about Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology and Norse mythology, you have all these things that it's their way of trying to explain this mythology within the context of historical events and Assassin's Creed and all that. So yeah, they definitely lean a bit more into the supernatural there. And yeah, so you can definitely do that. A big Anubis, a big crocodile, a big snake, things like that. So yeah, definitely leaning into some of the Egyptian gods there. So Assassin's Creed was at this turning point where it had been an annual series from 2009 to 2015. All the way from Assassin's Creed 2, after they, took the year off between 2007 for the original. 8 was an off year, 2009 Assassin's Creed 2. But then, oh gosh, Brotherhood, Revelations, 3, Black Flag, Unity and Rogue in there in 2014. And then Syndicate. Boom, 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 boom every year. And we saw with Assassin's Creed Unity moving to a new generation of consoles, kind of leaving 360 and PS3 behind.
And Faces.
Yeah, well, yeah, leaving Faces behind as well, because there were a lot of technical struggles with the French Revolution game in Unity. And so as a result of this, the next year with the Industrial Revolution London game Syndicate, there were some lagging sales. It was kind of being a little tepid there. And so Ubisoft was like, all right, maybe people are getting burned out of yearly Assassin's Creed games. So Ubisoft gave their main Montreal studio an extra year to refresh the franchise. And so development on Origins started at Ubisoft Montreal following their work on 2013's Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. So the 4-year development involved a team of around 300 people in Montreal and nearly 700 people from other Ubisoft studios all around the world, including Sofia, Singapore, Shanghai, Chengdu, Bucharest, Kiev, and Sperasoft Software. Interesting to note that Singapore, in particular, was responsible for bringing over the work that they had done on Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag with the pirate ship. There's a little bit of ship combat in this game in Origins. It's kind of crammed in there. A little weird for, ancient Egypt, but okay, it works, I guess. What's Singapore done since then? Oh, right. They're the ones who are involved with Skull and Bones, the pirate-inspired game that didn't really flesh out in anything, and there's a contract with the Singapore government to finish oh my gosh, what a mess. Oh my goodness. Well, ancient Egypt was a highly requested setting from the fans, and the development team wanted to explore it, but also make it feel as authentic as possible. This involved consulting many Egyptologists and historians, as well as books and pop culture portrayals to get a sense of the area at the time. But because this was the earliest set Assassin's Creed game, these historical works did not always suffice for reference, so the dev team had the freedom to kind of fill in the blanks, if they were there, for how they wanted to portray the world. This was also, kind of getting in a little more of a tech front, this is the first Assassin's Creed game that implemented HDR, high dynamic range. So to refine how the game displayed colors, the team introduced a new color grading feature to help them create specific and unique color ambiances. They also used satellite images of Egypt to fine-tune the colors for the ground and the vegetation to make them look as realistic as possible. Let's talk about that character of Aya, because as someone who has been seeing this game played a couple times over the last year or two, it is interesting to see, okay, yeah, Bayek is a fine assassin and all that. It's a good character, but you could tell that there was so much more that wanted to be done with Aya. She's immediately a more interesting character. She's, up for debate, but she's the more badass between the two, the more cutthroat, just willing to get the job done. You want to see more of Aya and her perspective and how she deals with the loss of, her son with Bayek. But you hardly interact with Aya. And the player only assumes control of her for a couple of ship-based missions, a la Black Flag, and a difficult stealth approach at the end of the game. But that's really it. Well, with all of the Ubisoft abuse scandal stories that have gone on over the past couple of years, we have only recently come to learn that the development team on Assassin's Creed Origins really wanted players to be able to play as Aya more. In fact, it seems to be closer to a 50-50 split, and which that makes sense, especially after the twin protagonists of Jacob and Evie Fry in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. But in 2020, a report from Bloomberg alleged that Ubisoft, in particular, the marketing department and chief creative officer, Sarah Schachner, they tried to minimize the role of female assassins in a number of Assassin's Creed games, Origins in particular. Apparently, Bayek was initially expected to be killed off early in the game, and the player character would assume the role of Aya instead. And that makes so much sense, because when you figure out who Aya is revealed to be in the series' lore at the end of the game, she is by far the more important character. So it's just really weird to see like this badass female assassin that you want to play as more just get seriously shrifted and, cut short in the narrative. And then it's like, oh, misogyny at Ubisoft, right?
At least in terms of game content, not getting into real life stuff that is assuredly still happening at Ubisoft while they continue to be investigated. At least, Odyssey and Valhalla, they let you play as the female character. So
yeah, at least they got that right, and there doesn't really seem to be like a canon choice. Well, I take that back. It's weird that in Valhalla there's like a canon choice of letting the Animus pick for you, so you go back and forth between being male and female Eivor. But you could honestly go either way in Odyssey. But yeah, you're right. At least that happened. But it's rough in Origins, and like the last third of the game too, where like you could have easily seen Aya be more fleshed out, just goes zoom. Like they hit the accelerator hard on the last third of the narrative in that game to an uncomfortable degree. So yeah, you can definitely tell that cuts happen in that regard, for the worst, for sure, because Aya, chef's kiss, fantastic. Assassin's Creed Origins reviewed well, with a Metacritic average of 84 on PC, 81 on PS4, and 85 on Xbox One. Many critics called it an improvement over previous entries in the series, and praised the story, characters, voice acting, the reworked gameplay systems, the world design, historical accuracy, and the visuals. The game drew criticism, though, for its pacing, the quest design, they were kind of still new at it, and also technical issues. I mean, you can look at Video Game Donkey's video, and yeah, there were some rough things happening at launch, especially on PC. So, sales for Origins, how did that happen? How did that work out? They had all the tepid sales from Syndicate take a year off. 2017, how did it work out? Well, sales for Origins over the first 10 days were more than double what they were for Syndicate. The game ended up selling over 10 million copies. But it was part of an insane year that was 2017 in video games, and yet it was still nominated for several awards. Though in a year of everything, Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Persona 5, Nier Automata, like all of these amazing, Cuphead, Yakuza 0. 2017 was a great year, but yeah, still kind of makes its mark in nominations. It was nominated for Best Action Adventure Game at the Game Awards, nominated for Best Game, Game Design, and Performer for Abu Bakr Salim as Bayek at the BAFTAs. It was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Character for Bayek, Outstanding Technical Achievement, and Adventure Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. And it was nominated for Video Game Score of the Year at the ASCAP Composer's Choice Awards. The legacy of the game, it was interesting because there was a partnership with Final Fantasy 15 in December 2017, where you had some Final Fantasy 15 inspired missions in Origins where there was like some interactions with Arden.
I did not know that. What?
Oh yeah, it was a weird partnership and crossover. You got some Final Fantasy 15 inspired gear, like a chocobo as a mount. So that's what I have still running in my Origins save file. Just really, really cool stuff. Even like Noctis's light sword. It's just really, really good stuff. Good gear. Good legendary gold gear. And then I think there was also a mission in Final Fantasy 15 as well, where you'd go to like Egyptian ruins and all that. So a neat little crossover there. There were DLC expansions for the game. There was the Hidden Ones in January 2018 and Curse of the Pharaohs in March 2018. There was also something called the Discovery Tour, which was released in February 2018 as free DLC through the game, but it became a free standalone application in May 2020. And what this was, it's an educational tour where people can just assume a playable character and kind of walk around ancient Egypt, like walk around Alexandria and other areas, and then find these interactive points and then learn about life in ancient Egypt. They've done this for the Odyssey and Valhalla games as well, and it's definitely been a push for, bring this into classrooms and like elementary school and public schools and all that, private schools even, I'm sure. But like that's the big push there. It's a really neat thing if you just want to kind of lean back and take in all the historical environment and learn about life there. It's a neat thing, the discovery tour that they've done with these recent Assassin's Creed games. And so, yes, 2018 was a sequel of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And then in 2020, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Valhalla is still going through some DLC. They had a couple expansions, and there's one that's going to be announced tomorrow as of time of recording, or yesterday as of time of release of this episode. It's actually just got leaked. It's going to be diving more into a Norse mythology kind of expansion. Not just like a little expansion that these couple were in their season pass, but like it may be even like a big standalone release. So more information to come, but yeah, definitely diving more into Norse mythology in that one. So yeah, they're still building on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but a future game is planned in the works for the Assassin's Creed series, trying to turn it into a games as a service, calling it Assassin's Creed Infinity. All we know is that Ubisoft has confirmed the title, that they're working on it, but that's all we know. But the series is still going strong.
I'm sure there's no way that could be a monetary disaster for everyone involved.
It's going to be interesting because, speaking as the Assassin's Creed fan here, I love what they did with the modern day story at the end of Valhalla. Like, it's bringing it to a really cool point. And if they just start turning it into like an endless games as a service, like throwing all that out the window, that'd be frustrating. I don't know. We'll see.
If Avengers couldn't do it, you can't do it, guys.
Maybe give up on the format. So I wanted to talk about Assassin's Creed Origins finally because the composer is someone I wanted to bring to the show for a while, and that would be Sarah Schachner. Sarah Schachner was born on March 27th, 1988 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When she was 5, she first started playing the piano and then started playing the violin. Now, local kids apparently took up shields and swords to play on the full-sized Viking ship in her backyard growing up. And this was the result of a letter-writing campaign to the Leif Erikson Society. So I think it's fascinating that she would, end up working on Assassin's Creed and also work on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. If you grew up with a Viking ship in your backyard and you end up working on this series, that's just incredible. A neat little detail I found in some of the research. She kept learning other instruments as she grew up, including viola and cello, and she played with both family and in an orchestra, as well as a jazz band. She attended the Berklee College of Music and then moved to Los Angeles, where she began to work with composer Brian Tyler, who worked in film and then started writing video game music. And so we brought up Brian Tyler on the show for his work on Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And so with his time in Hollywood and delving into games, starting with 2011's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, that was Schachner's first start as she contributed additional music to MW 3.
That's a hell of a first game to put stuff on.
Yeah, it's a good into the industry, both in, films and games and all of that. Interesting story here, though, that I found where in 2016, Ted Cruz's presidential campaign used one of Schachner's songs, Lens, without permission in an ad that ran on TV. As the composer, she and the performer, along with a licensing firm, sued the Cruz campaign in May 2016 for copyright infringement. The campaign settled for $55,000. So you get him. You get Ted Cruz, Sarah Schachner.
Get bent, Ted.
You can follow her on Twitter at Sarah Schachner, last name of Schachner. What games and other media has Sarah Schachner worked on? Well, that would be for the Assassin's Creed series. There was Black Flag, then Unity, also then Origins, and then she would be on the team for Valhalla. For Call of Duty, she was an arranger for Modern Warfare 3. She composed for Infinite Warfare, and also was the composer for Modern Warfare in 2019, the reboot there. She was also the composer on Anthem. I wouldn't talk about games of service there, but, Anthem as well. Tough game, but a great soundtrack, honestly. She composed music for Chef's Table, which is on Netflix, The Lazarus Effect, which is a film, and then worked on additional music and arrangements for other Brian Tyler projects, including Iron Man 3, Now You See Me, and Now You See Me 2, The Expendables 2, Far Cry 3, Need for Speed The Run, and Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel. She also worked with NASA on the Jet Propulsion Lab Mission Control and Cassini Finale music projects. So, Sarah Schachner gets the chance to work on Assassin's Creed Origins, this ancient Egyptian game that she gets the big music drive all to herself. And so, interesting to look back on and think, well, historians don't really know what Ptolemaic Egyptian music sounded like. So, Schachner ended up merging old and new styles because it not only reflected a culture deeply tied to its mythology, but it was also in keeping with the Assassin's Creed series' themes of secretive organizations and the near supernatural. So Schachner used traditional instruments while creating the score, ranging from the oud, lyres, and various bells and winds, to lutes, rattles, and animal hide drums, all of which would, quote, bring the player back to the sand. She wanted to convey the perceived dual nature of the Egyptian deserts as lands home to both nature's exotic beauty and its unforgiving power, as heard in the rough sounds made by an undisclosed string instrument. Certainly, there was inspiration from Jesper Kid's scores for Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. If you're going back to the foundations of the franchise with Origins, kind of look at how the foundations are musically as well. Schachner didn't want to retread the expected stereotypical Middle Eastern sounds, though, so she ran the recordings through a CS80 synthesizer in order to give them the air of mystery that pervades Assassin's Creed. Schachner also recorded all of the music herself, except for some percussion by fellow composer Jason Graves, who we actually covered on our Until Dawn episode where he was the composer. So I think that's one of the coolest things about this score is it has this big bombastic sound, but then you think there was no orchestra, that they didn't go to Abbey Hall to record with the big orchestra. No, this was all Schachner's work putting it all together, and it sounds so good. Very different sounds for the Assassin's Creed games we talked about with Austin Wintory's Syndicate score and Jesper Kid's score on 2, and then Brian Tyler's pirate-inspired Black Flag score. This is something different altogether. So let's highlight Sarah Schachner's work in Assassin's Creed Origins with the 5 critical tracks. And we have to start with Assassin's Creed Origins' main theme. Oh, this soundtrack is so good. So for the main theme of the game, the big place where this plays is on the title screen. The clip here is kind of at the end of the piece where it's the big swell of everything, but it starts really subtly and slowly. But a lot of these melodies with the main melody that goes through this clip as you hear, but also this little da 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 da, this kind of electric guitar in a way, sounds like it at least, going back through it. That's a big leitmotif as well. Just a great song that I think encapsulates the big action and the melodies here. Also, Sarah Schachner is just a badass. That's also her vocals on this track. She did just about everything, and it sounds so good. So this is a piece where I hear it and it takes me right back to that title screen, loading up the world and really diving into an adventure with Bayek in Ptolemaic Egypt.
This song is in fact Egypt as hell. It's very Middle Eastern, which, remember, Egypt is technically that. And, the fact that all of these instruments were hers and it sounds like it was played by a damn orchestra. Like, damn. I don't know how to process that. That's some Christopher Madigan first time composing stuff right there. But yeah, I 100% in the context of, hey, this game takes place in Egypt. This song is perfect for that setting.
And it's amazing too, right? Because, she said how she didn't want it to, hit on those kind of tropes, the, traditional Middle Eastern sound that you'd imagine. But at the same time, like, you get the sense of Egypt. And I think that's just a big accomplishment there, to not hit on something that's so hackneyed and cliche, but also instill that same feel. Let's get to number 2 on their Critical 5 though. And it's some battle music here. In fact, it's a fun title. This is the Battle of Crocodilopolis. So much to love about this piece. I feel like it's one of the battle tracks that you'll hear more throughout the game. And Crocodilopolis, a great name, but that's also a place like in ancient Egypt there where they revere Sobek, the crocodile god there.
I know who Sobek is because of H Bomber Guy, and that's literally the only reason.
Well, there you go. So it makes sense then that this battle music especially shows up when you're going through these areas where there are dangerous predator animals. Like, there are these packs of wild animals, whether they're hippopotamuses or hyenas or lions or crocodiles. And so, like, this track will, generally come up when you're kind of encountering one of those areas. And it's just such a cool piece. I love, like, the thumping, the bass that kind of goes behind it, that kind of pulls in, like, oh, the Assassin's Creed like franchise vibe of it, like the synth music that comes into play there. But I also love the string instrument that goes kind of almost like fluttering there, and I feel like that really gives a good feeling of like wildlife, animals, like you're almost like disrupting something there, and nature wants to strike back. So many cool things going on here. Not only the great intense piece of the battle music, but just, again, all the instruments at play and working so well to create an exciting atmosphere.
All of those strings sound super cool. Like, every single string part in this entire song is some of the coolest work with, like, string instruments I've ever heard in a game. Wow. It's fantastic. This is, I think, 100% my favorite on the Critical 5. Like, just bar none, this is the one. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think if you pick out one track from this game, it's the main theme, but this is a sneaky good one that you'll hear a lot, and it sounds so good. Yeah, when you start to go away from the traditional stringed instruments of like the violin, the viol, and all that, and you start to either mix up their sound a little bit with like the synth processing and all that, but also tap into some older string instruments that you don't normally hear. Like, this is the result, and it sounds so good. Let's get to number 3 on the Critical 5, though, for Assassin's Creed Origins, and it's I Walk on Your Water. Gosh, talk about using string instruments just even more to really cool degrees there. This one plays in investigation scenes. Commenters seem to note that it seemed to especially play during ritual site investigations. There are some missions where Bayek's like investigating a series of murders that have taken place at a ritual site, and like the big stakes here kind of intensify and sounds so good. Again, the thumping bass and rhythm patterns that really are very Jesper Kid like establishing what Assassin's Creed has been, kind of mixing that into all of these ancient Egyptian string sounds. Dun, da, dun, da, dun, da, dun. Like it's just a really great vibe here. So it's not like action intensive, but as you're exploring like these crime scenes, like there's some intense feelings there. I've just really heard this one and like, oh, yep, I definitely recognize this one. I like it a lot. Wanted to put it in the Critical 5.
It's weird that it's investigation music, though. It feels more like it should be playing when you're like evading something.
Oh, and granted, I mean, the whole piece, like it starts a little quieter. And so like that kind of starts, but like this is more, the action is picked up. Let's the important to pick that out there.
Okay. Yeah. Especially the part you can hear in the clip is like a lot more hiding from the guards while they're looking for you and you're trying to get out of the building or something like that.
Sure.
It's really, really good though. I still kind of, again, the strings are just, oh man. These strings make me wish that I had interest in going to play this game anytime soon because they're so good. But I still like crocodile.
Yeah.
The Pokemon. I like that better, but like this is yet another great showing of like, oh my god, these strings are so good.
Let's dive into some relaxed beauty though, and with a twinge of sadness here with number 4 on the Critical 5. And this is A Divided Land. Oh man, and then like the other side of this here is just how reflective and sad this is, but also appreciating the beauty of the land. This is synchronization music that plays a few times in the game, but players and commenters especially note that it plays after the memorable Shadia sequence. And wow, if you've played Assassin's Creed Origins, Shadia is a name that sticks out as a tough sequence to go through. Basically, you're going through one of the members of the Order of the Ancients has used a child as leverage in trying to hold on power in the region, and it does not end well. So that's a tough moment, and just appreciating the beauty of the land, but also definitely tinges of sadness in this one.
Yeah, you can feel the melancholy here. It's palpable and sad and very, very beautiful. I don't think there's any more I can add to that other than what you've already said, but this is absolutely gorgeous. This is a gorgeous song.
Yeah. And then the one in Power in particular is Greek, so it's playing off the title of A Divided Land. So you're talking about the dynamics of Egypt about to possibly lose their land to incoming Greek and Roman forces, and the dynamics at play there. It's all comes into it. Let's wrap up the Critical 5 though with the character theme. This is Bayek of Siwa. Just a great theme to round things out, even though it takes place early in the OST, just to round things out here. Bayek of Siwa, not a character with a last name, just Bayek, or Bayek of Siwa is where he's from, which would kind of carry over, I suppose, into Alexios and Cassandra, but, that's all. I guess that speaks to, like, the ancient time of the historical telling of the story there. But anyway, this character theme is so cool. And you're hearing that guitar, the da 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 da, like that comes back in a big way here. You're hearing that throughout the game. But also I like with this piece of how like that low, the kind of building up and kind of fading away. It kind of shows like the criminal evil underbelly in Egypt that needs to be rooted out by Bayek. I think this one's a really neat piece that kind of shows the action playing off of these leitmotifs that, show throughout the game. Just a neat piece to round things out.
My favorite part is the really deep that boom. It's super cool. You are correct. I think, though, instead of a guitar doing that one part, I think in this song it sounds almost like a cello that's been amped.
Okay.
At least that's the vibe I'm getting.
It could very well be that, honestly. It would kind of fit with the strings and all that, yeah.
It's really, really good still. Like, all 5 of these are winners.
I think they are too. I think it was, good, solid picks here, but we have a couple more on the cutting room floor. I have 2. One of these is Return of the Magi. This is some more battle music here, and I feel like it kind of plays a little bit more, maybe a little closer to some of those tropes in Middle Eastern music, because it definitely gave me that sort of vibe, but also making it its own, especially with the heavy drums behind it. Some good action here. This sometimes plays when you're up against phylakes, or big soldiers that come from Ptolemy's guard, who are out on the hunt for you. So like they're kind of big targets to take down in the world when you're at a high enough level. And so this comes in. Good wordplay on Return of the Magi, kind of a little bit of Star Wars play there. And I like that. I appreciate that. This is just a cool one. I liked how this sounded, and reminds me of some of those big showdowns.
It reminds me of a game soundtrack that came out after this, being The Pathless.
Sure, yeah.
Some of the stuff in The Pathless seems like it probably took its inspiration from the same place that some of this specific piece took it from, especially some of the boss fight music in Pathless 100%.
The other one I have on the cutting room floor, this is Winds of Cyrene. I feel like this is also a really cool one to explore. This really almost made the Critical 5. This is a medley of music that plays in Cyrene, which at the time was a Roman-occupied city in Libya. And so you get to explore Cyrene near the end of the game. It's kind of where the root of the Order of the Ancient operations are in the main story. And man, this clip highlights just more gorgeous sync music, especially when the camera's swooping out as you hit that synchronization point and reveal more of the map. And like, you're just seeing the beauty of this area. Love how the bells come into play here and just add another new texture layer of instruments here, especially when you're in this kind of foreign land with Roman occupied area. Just a beautiful, beautiful soundscape here.
Yeah, the bells really, really do some good work in this song. When it says sync music, you mean like, what exactly does that mean?
So you get up to the tower, the Eagle Point in Assassin's Creed, and you synchronize, and the camera kind of zooms out, and you get this big pan of the world. It helps kind of point out things on the map that you should go explore. It's the whole Ubisoft Towers thing.
Okay, for some reason my brain was like, does that mean like it's the crossover point between modern day and Egypt stories? Because somehow I completely forgot about the game that's the reason why the Ubisoft Tower exists.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the kind of foundation there for that game mechanic. So yeah, no, that's what happened. So it kind of gives you a bit moment to explore the beauty of the world and have the music swell and give you this kind of moment. Yep. So what will I never forget about Assassin's Creed Origins? It is a game that I'm going to forever link with my fiance, who, started playing the early Assassin's Creed games, but then jumping to this one was a big shift. And I think she did really well, as far as learning how to play games on consoles. And this is a big step, a big challenge for her, but she handled it really well. And so within the last year, she went back to play it again. And so I've seen this game been played through a couple times in a couple years. And she's like, all right, now that I know how these games have played, and, went and played Odyssey as well, went back to Origins. She's like, now I can actually appreciate it and play it better, and understanding all the mechanics instead of just kind of, going through it the first time. And so I've seen it twice. And so I really wanted to bring it to the show, but I'll definitely associate it with her, and just great experiences watching her play and learn how to play these games. It's amazing. I'll also remember how it set a new standard for Assassin's Creed, how these games have continued on since 2017's Origins, and just also cool stuff like the lore things like Aya and who she becomes and her role in history. Also dumb little things like at the end of the game, they show how the logo for the Assassins is created. That kind of A logo that is the logo for the series. They give an explanation for that in a subtle, really kind of cheeky way. So just little things like that. Things I'll remember about this game.
The logo thing almost feels like this is why Mickey wasn't wearing a shirt in Kingdom Hearts 1.
Almost, yeah.
I like the setting of Egypt. When I was a kid, I was really, really big into ancient Egypt. I don't know what changed that. Who knows? It was a long time ago. But I think ancient Egypt is cool.
Check out the Discovery Tour at least then. It's free.
Honestly, I might. If it's free, I absolutely might. Only time will tell.
Lots of things to play until then. So good to cover these games finally. I got to get back to Monument Valley and try to experience it with music. But you're right. Geometry, that's a big part of it. These sculptures and the pyramids. Oh my gosh, in ancient Egypt. But also these optical illusions with MC Escher, impossible geometry, and the mirages in the desert. Perfect for Monument Valley and Assassin's Creed Origins. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And you can find Original Soundchat and Smasherpieces wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed for the podcast episodes, but also a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to that monster playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
Both of these games are on Spotify, so we'll see both Monument Valley and Assassin's Creed Origins thrown in there.
That is excellent to hear. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also, suggestions for games that you'd like us to cover in 2022, because that's one of our continuing goals for the show, is more listener and viewer feedback on what to do for the show.
And hey, before we end it all today, I want to point everybody listening to the Twitter account for the ABK Workers Alliance. You can follow them at ABetterABK. This is the probably might end up being a union group at Activision Blizzard, where if you've looked at any headlines in the gaming industry recently, you know why that's probably happening. They actually started a strike 3 days ago at time of recording, and you should follow them. They're also doing a GoFundMe for a strike fund so that people on the strike can still afford to, feed their families and such over the holidays. Please show these people support. They want to make the video game industry better. Activision Blizzard cannot keep getting away with the things that it does. And Riot and Ubisoft, I'd also keep your damn eyes open. But yeah, please show them your support. This is very important.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. That's super important. And also, we have one more episode before Best of 2021. We're actually, some inside baseball after we're recording here, we have finalized our top 10 list. We're drafting our honorable mentions. We're getting real close. It's so exciting, people. Oh my gosh.
It's all becoming real.
Joe, who are we talking about next week on that last episode before Best of 2021?
I will be talking about Max LL.
And I will be talking about Petri Alanko. Should be a really good episode. An emotional one to close things out there for 2021. All right, to play us out, where could I find a track for a YouTube cover, a fan remix for Assassin's Creed Origins? Well, it's taking a riff on that main theme there. And YouTuber Bader Nana, Bader space Nana, did a rock cover of that main theme. And when you bring in some stringed instruments that are actual electric guitars and bass and all that and drums, it sounds so cool. So please enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.